Tonight, our main speaker is Janet. Help me welcome Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet. I'm an alcoholic. Congratulations to the chip takers. Proof that AA works. I wasn't convinced of that when I first came here. Let's see. Celeste was my sponsor, is my sponsor. And so I think it's really, really interesting that she talked about Tradition 3. When I first came into AA, I was 22 years old. My sobriety date is April 20th, 1983. And, you know, in 83, 420 meant nothing to anybody. Okay? And when you hear my story, you'll understand why that date is pretty hilarious. When I first came into AA, I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic for a long time. I had been to my first AA meeting. I'm going to move this towards me a little bit. Is that going to hurt anything? Because I feel like I'm doing this. No, it's not hurting anything? Okay. So when I was 14, I knew I was an alcoholic. I had been drinking alcoholically since I was 12. The first time I drank, I had a blackout. They took my keys to my snowmobile. They strapped me on the back of a saucer, very humiliating. Would not let me drive my snowmobile home. I was raised in Alaska. And so the first time I got drunk, everything bad that could happen happened. I also had a blackout. If I would have quit right then, okay. I could have told you I was an alcoholic then, but I just was getting started. By the time I was 14, I was a daily drunk. I was raised by an alcoholic and a crazy person. I went to my first AA meeting when I was 14 to get out of trouble. I had stolen my mother's car. I had asked if I could go to a party. She said no. I said, okay. I promptly waited until she fell asleep and hitchhiked down to the gravel pit. Got drunk very quickly. Some really bad stuff happened. I got a ride back up to my mom's house in a blackout, stole her car, drove around Anchorage, Alaska, didn't die, which is incredible, did knock a tooth out, and then went missing for 2 days. That, for me, was my physical bottom. I have a fatal disease called alcoholism. And so when I was 14, I had truly hit a bottom at that time. I knew I was in big trouble. I knew if I called my mom and said, I had gone to Alateen. That's the, little kids' version of Al-Anon. And so I knew I was an alcoholic because I drank alcoholically. I mean, I blacked out almost every time I drank, and I just couldn't stop. That's another thing, I couldn't stop. Once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. So when I called my mom, I had been missing. I had returned her car somehow, and I had called her after 2 days of being missing, and I said, Mom, I need help. I'm an alcoholic. Because I knew that I wouldn't get in trouble if I said that. I was a manipulator, I was a liar, I was a cheater, and I was a thief by the time I was 14. And this was normal. I thought this was normal. I thought everybody drank that way. So that was the beginning of 7 years of controlled drinking. So when I was 22, I had ended up in New York. I ended up in Long Island, New York. I married a nice Italian guy. I knew him 3 months. He said, marry me. I said, yeah, why? Yeah, okay, And so I ended up in Long Island, Amityville area, Lindenhurst. And somebody knows where that is? Far out. Yeah. So I graduated high school in 79, which was when Celeste was getting sober, which I think is funny. So my husband at the time So a lot of stuff happened, lots of blackouts. Couldn't stay faithful to save my life. You know, I mean, I'm sure that if you're an alcoholic and you're in this room, some of that stuff you can identify with. So my drinking was out of control. I could not stop when I started, so how I controlled it was choosing when I was going to drink. The other days, I just got high on marijuana, but that was a maintenance drug for me. But alcohol was my, that was my love. So when I got sober, I met a guy in a bar, amazing, and he used to tell me I was an alcoholic. And I'd be like, well, of course I'm an alcoholic. Who drinks this way if they're not an alcoholic? Like, you're an asshole. But, I don't know if there's any rules about cussing, but I just broke them. And anyway, so he would bug me, at the bar, and I would not talk to him. And finally, my husband at the time, I was married for about 2 years, and, he finally said, either you stay home, like I would go home and get a fight with him and then go back to the bar. That's kind of how I would work that, and then he would not care. And this one night he decided to care that I was drinking for some reason, and he says, either if you leave, we're done. And so I was 22 in Long Island, New York. I had no family there. His family hated me. I didn't like them either. So they were not very nice people. And but I was a drunk, so there is a reason for everything. And so I decided to stop drinking. I hadn't tried to stop drinking in a long time. When I was 14, I tried to stop drinking for about a year. I went on the marijuana maintenance program for that year, and then I started drinking again. And I really thought I had it licked, and I didn't. But anyway, so I finally was out of control and decided I needed to quit drinking because it was bad. I mean, it was really bad. I hated myself. I hated my husband. I hated my life. I hated everything. I hated my job. I just hated people. I wasn't really suicidal, but if I would have died, it would have been okay with me at that time. It was like not conscious, but I was in dangerous places all the time, in blackouts. And so I went to the bar, and I sat right next to this guy who was bugging me all the time. And I asked him, I said, and I also knew about AA, because my mom, every time I would drunk dial her, she would say, why don't you go to an AA meeting? I'm like, nah. No. Because of the one time I went to an AA meeting, there was a lot of old people, probably about my age, all men, and I was 14, and so everybody was really, really ancient, and maybe they were 20, maybe they were 25 or 40, I don't know. But I just didn't think AA was for me. So when I realized that AA was probably the only hope I had to change my life and to maybe do something different than what I was doing day in and day out. I mean, my life consisted of how I was going to get it, how I was going to do it, how I was going to hide it, how I was going to get away with it. I mean, this is the cycle of my life, And I happened to have a job in a factory, and I remember drinking on the job, and the Polacks letting me drink their vodka. That was fantastic. And I would take my little walk around the factory, and they'd go, come here, But anyway, so I went up to this guy, and I said, is there any AA meetings? Are there any AA meetings in the area? And they're like, oh, yeah, there's one tonight. I'm like, tonight? Oh, yeah, tonight. Amityville Friendly Group. You want to go? Well, do you have to stop smoking pot to go to AA? And he's like, no. All you have to have is a desire to stop drinking. That's it. I'm like, really? That's it? I don't have to stop. No. Just come. We'll pick you up. Me and my girlfriend will pick you up, 6:30. I was like, oh, crap, I'm going to an AA meeting. So I handed him my drink, and I got the hell out of the bar because all of a sudden it didn't feel right to be in a bar. And I went home, and I actually picked my husband up at the train station, the Copaig's train station, if anybody knows where that is. And Yeah. All right. A great deli right across the street from that train station, too. It was my husband at the time. His family owned that deli. It was really good food. Anyway, so I picked him up at the train station instead of him having to call me at the bar to come get him. And he was like, hey, what's up, And I said, I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to an AA meeting. And he was like, why? You're not an alcoholic. I'm like, okay, I'm going to an AA meeting. So that was the beginning of me going to AA. And what I had decided is that life was going to suck if I drank. And life was going to suck if I got sober. Life was just going to suck. But it might suck a little less if I got sober. This was my idea. And so I started going to meetings, and Amityville Friendly Group was my first meeting. And I would hound people, because I would go to the meeting and I'd go, I'd sit there and I'd say, hey, whenever someone would talk to me, I'd say, hey, do you have to stop quitting? Do I have to stop smoking pot to, be a member? And they're like, no, you don't. Just have a desire to stop drinking. I was like, oh, cool, And so I don't know how long that went on, honestly, but finally this lady, Loretta, I said to her, Loretta, do I really, should I be not smoking pot? Because there was something inside me that didn't feel, this was a worry for me. I had a problem. I was concerned. And she said, Janet, look, this is what you do. Stop smoking pot. Just stop. And when you have 3 years sober, you can smoke pot again. I'm like, yeah, that's the answer. Because apparently, no one would tell me no, but she gave me an out. Because, Alcoholics Anonymous, that's serious. There's only, what Celeste talks about with the tradition is like the only desire, the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. That's it. So at that time in 1983, no one would tell me what to do. No one would tell me if I was an alcoholic. I had to come to that myself. And I remember the first day I said, I'm Janet, I'm an alcoholic, and I bawled like a baby because I was just, number one, I was miserable, and I was not wanting to say I was an alcoholic. Because if I was an alcoholic and I said it out loud, I might have to stop drinking. And I could do nothing clean and sober. I could do nothing sober, right? I couldn't dance. I was afraid all the time. I didn't like people. I couldn't talk to people. I was nervous. I was anxious, I was a mess, and I was 22 years old, and I truly didn't know how to live my life. And so I got a sponsor. I had to ask 5 old ladies before I got one. That really pissed me off, too. I'm like, no one will help me. And they're like, just keep asking. I was like, these people, I hate them, And I'd walk away, and I was mad. I was just mad all the time. Now, you look at me today, I look like a nice old lady, right? Not then. I was just mad. And I was a punk. And I was pretty scrappy. But they told me to keep coming. They told me to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. They told me, actually, they didn't even say that. They just said go to meetings and don't drink in between. Just go to a meeting and don't drink. Just go to a meeting and don't drink. And so for me, I did finally get a sponsor. Somebody felt sorry for me. Her name was Jeanette. And she was a little old Catholic lady. And I was convinced that she had nothing to offer me at all. Okay. I wanted to get rid of my husband. I wanted to change jobs. I wanted to, do a lot of stuff. And what they told me is like, they don't let you do anything when you're first sober. It's like, no, don't do that. You can't do that. No major changes in the first year. No major changes in the first year. And I was like, you guys are driving me crazy. I got to change. This guy, I hate this guy. I'm going to drink if I stay married to this guy. No major changes. And, it's like no major changes. I was like, oh, my God, I'm so tired of hearing that. So I just finally surrendered. It's like I surrendered. And I asked God every morning. I said, God, just help me stay sober. Somebody told me that. I didn't come up with that. I came up with nothing original, I got to tell you. Everything that I learned, I came up with because someone in Alcoholics Anonymous told me to do that. Once in a while, I think I have an original thought, and I don't. I find out that, oh, no, That was Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm like, I'm a genius. It's like, no, I'm not. I just do what the big book told me. I do what the old-timers told me. And I grew up. I became a person who cared about other people. I became a person who was honest. I mean, honesty is very subjective, right? I mean, I think so. I thought so at one time. That honesty was like, okay, I can be honest. If I don't get caught, I don't have to tell you anything, right? If nobody sees it, I'm good. I'm golden. And I learned that that doesn't feel good on the inside. When I started doing my 4 steps, when I started doing my steps. Now, I didn't do a 4-step until I was a year sober. Back east where I came from, at that time, we didn't do steps right away. They're like, just don't drink and go to meetings. That's it. Don't drink and go to meetings. And I didn't go to a rehab, so I didn't do any of the therapy stuff that I ended up having to do when I was 4 years sober because it was kicking my butt. And I was like, okay, all I got to do is not drink and go to meetings, one day at a time, that's it. And to this day, if I'm at a bar or a restaurant and somebody asks me, you want a drink? And I say, not today. I never tell people I don't drink. What's the point of that? You know, it's like that just makes me feel bad. I feel like a loser when I used to say that. And because for me, that was my identity. You know, that's who I was for a long time, and that's what gave me courage. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, I found courage in a whole different way. I started to get to know myself when I started doing the steps. I have a friend of mine today, her name is Susan, and we were talking on the phone today, actually. I was talking to her, and I said, can you believe that we have known each other for 33 years, and we're still talking to each other? Like, that is incredible. And we're both sober, and we've been sober ever since then. And that was when I was a newcomer, and if I was sitting there and someone said that, I was like, no way. There's absolutely no way that's true. They're lying. I wouldn't believe it because I couldn't conceptualize. The old-timers used to tell me that if I stuck around and I did what they said to do, you know, it's kind of like, do you want what we have? And these weirdos, they would be laughing and joking, and they thought shit was funny that I just thought was so dumb. Because I would sit there and I'd be like, what are they laughing about? You know, this is a miserable life. I am sober. What is wrong with this picture? You know, but I knew that I couldn't live my life drunk either. I was like, you know. So I finally did a 4-step. I finally did a 5th step, and I finally, for the first 4 years of my sobriety, I went to meetings and I went home. I had none of this fellowship because really alcoholics, I wasn't so crazy about these alcoholics. And I'm sorry, this guy who's going to have 50 years sober on Friday is calling me, and I don't know why. That's incredible. Okay, anyway, sorry. I'm just trying to keep track. Okay, I don't know how to do this. All right. Where was I? 4 years sober. So when I was 4 years sober, I had an emotional breakdown to the point I had gone to school. I had finally left my husband that I didn't like, and my sponsor didn't like that. Is that time not changing? Does that clock work? That time doesn't seem to be changing. I'm very distracted. Okay. Anyway, I'm assuming that time works. Oh, it does. Okay. Anyway, I had gone back to school. So what had happened in my life is that I started getting better. I started liking Alcoholics Anonymous. I started I started being able to tolerate the people. I went to a lot of meetings. I went to a meeting every day. I went to a meeting every day for several years. I was afraid that if I didn't go to a meeting, I might drink. And I learned early on that if I didn't want to drink, I went to meetings. And if I went to meetings, I felt better. And if I didn't go to meetings, I didn't feel as good as I did when I went to meetings. And in my sobriety, because I'm sober 36 years, that has come true every single time. When shit hits the fan, I go to meetings. Because whatever's happened, evening, I can sit in this room for an hour and not worry about stuff. I don't have to make any decisions. I cannot drink for 1 hour. I can just sit here and be sober and not have to worry about stuff for an hour. And at the end of that hour, I feel better. And it's magic. I don't know how it happens, but for me, that's what happened to me. They told me, keep coming until you want to come, because I didn't want to come for a long time. And I moaned and I complained, but I came because I knew it was all I had. This was the last house on the block for me, because at that time my life was not going well. And it was this, or I believe I would be dead. I never believed I would live past 30. I just turned 59. I mean, that is old AF, I'm telling you. So, it's very terrible. That means I'm really close to 60. But I'm sober. I'm not afraid today. I'm not afraid today. So I want to go back to 4 years sober, because this is important. A lot of people will tell you that, you do the steps. Some of us, myself, I needed extra help because I couldn't do my life with just the steps. I'd done the steps, and I had depression. I still didn't know how to get close to people. I still didn't know how to be completely honest. I still didn't know how to make friends. I mean, I would go to meetings, and I got, and I did service. I made coffee. Oh my God, I made the best coffee. And if anybody told me that they didn't like my coffee, I was like, F you, get out of the room. It's like, I'm not talking to you. I was very territorial about my service commitments, but I did secretary, and I mean that is how I stayed sober, as I got involved and I attended. At 4 years sober, I started making some really bad decisions, and I was in an internship, and I made a really bad decision. I chose to date somebody I shouldn't be dating because I had this relationship issue problem, into sobriety. They call it all kinds of things today. At that time, I just had an issue with honesty and respecting people's relationships. That's what I'm going to say. So today they call it all kinds of crazy stuff. But at the time, I got into big trouble with that. And so I was told that I needed some extra help. So I went and I got some extra help. And I went to an inpatient place. And I learned that my childhood, some of my wounds from my younger years, was getting in the way of me living my life 100% fully. And I started doing that extra work about the stuff that I drank over. I have alcoholism. It's a fatal disease all by itself. Anybody can get it, if they have it. And it doesn't matter, what the trauma was. But I happen to have a lot of trauma that I used and I medicated over. And I was either going to have to face myself and my history, or I was going to get drunk, and I knew it. And so I did. I went for help, and that changed my life, and it changed my relationship with God. I just want to talk about God a little bit. I did what people told me to do. I couldn't trust my brain. To this day, if I have a major decision, you'd think at 59 and 36 years sober, you could make a decision on your own, right? You think that. But I'm still an alcoholic. I still get batshit crazy if I'm not in these rooms. If I'm not talking to a sponsor, I still have a sponsor. I call her on a regular basis. I don't do my life without the program. This makes a difference. In the quality of my life, I have fun. I was convinced when I got sober that life was going to be black and white. Literally. There was no fun to be had ever again for the rest of my life. But I found out there was a lot of fun. Yesterday, I'm learning how to ride a motorbike. That's really a lot of fun. I'm scared to death most of the time on the bike. I'm like, I'm going to die. Woohoo! This is great! I'm like going 65 with a Rebel Honda 250, feeling everything on the road, going, I got to get a bigger bike. I'm gonna die out here if I don't get a bigger bike. And I'm married to a man that I respect and honor and love, and Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to just stay sober and to just live my day one day at a time. 5 years ago, my mom died, and my my second, so I'm on my third husband. You know, hey, that's good. I like that. Variety. It's a lot of fun. This one is great. My third one is fantastic. He bought me the bike, so I'm really happy with him. But my second husband died of cancer, and because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was able to show up for him. I was able to care for him. I was able to put myself on the side. You know, he died within 7 years. I have a son who is in NAU who's never seen me drunk, you know, which is incredible. I'm crazy sometimes, but it is incredible. I work 3 programs. I work an Al-Anon program, and I work an Alcoholics Anonymous program, and I work a food program because I am a food addict as well. But Alcoholics Anonymous is my main gig. You know, I am an alcoholic, and if I'm not sitting in this room, if I'm not doing service, when I was asked to speak, I had just spoke at the VA, and I said yes, because if you're asked to do service in this place, you say yes, because I was taught as well. I don't get to keep it unless I give it away. And, you know, and I do sponsor. I didn't raise my hand before because I was like, oh, sponsoring. Oh, am I sponsoring? And then by the time I was ready to raise my hand, I was like, okay, over. So there it is. So just so you know. I have a home group in Chino Valley. It's 8:30 a.m. because now that I'm my age, I get up at 5 a.m. and like, you know, what are you going to do? Let's go to a meeting. When my mom and my husband died, my mom died on a Sunday, my husband died on a Monday. The whole time that they were sick, I went to meetings every day. Sometimes I go to 2 meetings because Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life. And it saves my sanity. I can actually be nice to people. Like when I'm not going to meetings, I'm yelling at the shopkeepers because they piss me off, because I have an anger problem. You know, it's like no mystery. I do a lot of self-care. You know, I went from asking God to keep me sober and thanking Him at night to, you know, in the morning I'm reading my books and I'm praying, you know, and if I don't get a nice cup of, you know, a whole pot of coffee in the morning, if I don't have time for my whole meditation and conscious contact with God, I'm not very happy about that, you know. I hang out in the hot tub. I mean, my life is good, and it's not because of me. My life is good because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because all I did, and I mean really, it's so simple, all I did was do what they told me to do. And I do work. I've worked in treatment centers a lot. I'm not presently. I work for myself, and I'm in my master's program for marriage and family therapy. And you know, what's interesting is that I've seen a lot of people. I've known a lot of people die of this disease, man, a lot, and it breaks my heart every time I hear of somebody dying. And what's interesting is that I've seen a lot of people that are too smart for Alcoholics Anonymous because it's just too simple. You know, nobody has to drink again ever if they just do what the next person says. Those of us who've been before you, just do what they say. Put your mind on a break and just do what they say. What do they say? The sponsor says, go to a meeting. You go to a meeting. You call the sponsor. You call the sponsor. I mean, it's that simple. We try to complicate the heck out of this program. And if we don't complicate it, we just don't drink and go to meetings, you can stay sober. Because I'm telling you, this mind, you know, the big book talks about the problem centers in our mind. The crazy is here. And I used to think the crazy was you guys. This is where the crazy is. And the only thing that keeps this from not being crazy, and the big book talks about it. If you read the book, I couldn't read the big book. It made me want to drink at first. So, you know, read it with somebody. It's safe to read it with somebody. But I used to read the stories in the back. But I had, you know, people tell me that the problem center's in the mind. The problem center's in the mind. My present husband, that's his favorite phrase. The problem center's in the mind. So when he's being goofy, I'm like, you know. So we have a common language, which is kind of cool. But that's all I did. And I'm sober today, and I do keep it in the day. I really do. You know, it's like if I think that I'm going to be sober forever, I mean, the chances of me being sober tomorrow is great. Yeah, I mean, that's that's really great because my life is too good. But I know if I were to pick up, my life would be shit in a minute. I mean, literally, in a minute. And I've had to go to therapy, and I've had losses, and I've miscarried, I've had, deaths in my family, I've had moves, I've had bankruptcy. I mean, you think anything bad has happened, it's happened to me. Like when my mom and my husband died in the same weekend. Like, who does that, God. WTF. Somebody said that's like, well, that's fantastic. But I know the truth. I know that that's not what it means. And it's one of my favorite little emoji things. I am sober and clean today. I love my life, and I owe it all to Alcoholics Anonymous. I know how to live. I know how to be a member of society. That's incredibly strange to be a member of society, an upstanding member of society. I never thought I would be. I really didn't. I honestly sometimes think, who am I? I crochet, I do weird stuff like that. Whatever. I watch musicals. I like that too, But I just live my life. Nothing spectacular. No big mansions, Nothing spectacular, just a good, healthy life with good, healthy people. And a fellowship that, it talks about a vision for you, and it talks about growing up, having the fellowship grow up around you when you stay clean and sober. The other thing I like, if you read the traditions, how many of you know what Rule 62 is? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, a couple. So Rule 62 is don't take yourself too seriously. And if you read about the traditions, you read about how they came up with that. And I think it's fantastic because I think too many of us take ourselves way too seriously. And you know what? I didn't get sober to not have a good time. And this is a good time to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're cordially invited to join us again next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately 100 meetings of AA each week in the Prescott area. We advise that you attend as many as possible, and we hope you'll join us again soon. After the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do that stuff, and your court cards are in the back right corner. Let's circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Thank you all for coming.